Hi everyone, I'm going to show you how I'm going to do my next project. I'm going to make some stick insect enclosures out of a weather-beaten greenhouse. I'd bought it in spring and it only lasted till autumn last year. Some of the joints got all cracked in gale force winds and the covering got ripped where the poles had come out. So I thought, well, it's irreparable as a greenhouse, so waste not, want not, I'll make some stick insect enclosures. I know you can buy butterfly nets and things like that online, stick insect enclosures, but if you can make something for near enough free, why not? What I'm going to do is, these two pieces they were the shelving units, so they were that way up, and you could walk in. I'm going to turn one of the shelves around. Now I could undo the welding and that, but I thought no, I don't want to leave sharp pieces, so I'm going to just turn one of these shelves around so that the mesh is on the very outside. That one's already going to be on the outside, if you can see that. I'm going to saw the excess of the corners off, and then I'm going to cut pieces of the polythene to shape for each side, and I'm going to have mesh in the front with a zipped door, and I'm going to join the pieces together with bias binding, similar to this, but I'm going to use a stronger material than that. That's quite like plasticky, if you like. I do a lot of sewing, so I do have a plan in mind. There's a lot more pieces of pole down there and joins and that, so I'm gonna see how many I can make out of it. I think I'll run out of polythene before I run out of poles, so I may end up buying I don't know, some similar material which may be thicker than this, but as long as it serves its purpose. I have used laundry baskets before, but found that they provided too much ventilation, and the enclosures were getting too dry too quickly. And the problem with, I will probably find with this, is that these are steel poles, so I may have a problem with rust. So they might just be a temporary thing. I may try and cover the poles with what do you call it? Maybe not duct taping, because I think the glue on those is very strong, and if any peels back, the stick insect may stick to it. Just insulation tape or something like that, just so that any water that may land on them or condensation might just hopefully drip back off. So that's the loose plan up to now. I may, if I can find a tray to put in the bottom, well, it'd be quite hard to find exactly the right size. I may put a tray in the final finished thing, just so that it might be easier to collect eggs and poo, and that it won't sag. I intend for them to be hung up, really, because it really is lightweight. So I'm thinking maybe just some like hanging basket brackets with these hung up, because I'm quite short of space really in my spider room. It's very tiny. I will show you around my spider room one day. It just needs a bit of a tidy up and what have you. and a bit of reorganising needs to happen. I've got some Black Beauty stick insects that I want going in one of these because they're currently taking up a very large, well, I say a very large, a big Exoterra tank that I want to move one of my teas in. So really I want them out of that and into something else. So I'm going to crack on and saw these corners off first. So I cut the corners off. I didn't cut it right up to here because I didn't want to weaken the join. So I've just cut them a little bit out. Look at the saw I'm using, it's a bit overkill, but I couldn't find my little hacksaw. But it's not made any difference, just use any old saw. I was able to make just one more framework because of the joins that I had available. I could only make the one more, but I could make a bigger one because I had a different kind of join. There was just a T-piece, but I need some going that way as well to make the box shape. So I got 3 out of it up to now, pole and joint wise. There's still lots of poles left, but I'll probably just, so I've still got all those left, but I've no more joins left. I don't know whether you can buy those or not separately, I don't know. And I'm starting to cut the material. I'm cutting it with a couple of centimetres seam allowance all the way around, so you're not cutting it too close to the edge, and I would have trouble catching it in the bias binding then. So we'll see how much polythene I've got, remembering that the front is going to be mesh fabric, which you can buy from like fabric stalls on the market. I'll show you an example of what fabric mesh I mean. I bought some before to make an enclosure for my Atticus Atlas moths in the past. I don't know if you can see it, this is what I'm referring to. They use it for making tulle skirts, ballet skirts. They have lots of ruffles of this netting. They do all different colours I think, but I think black looks best. Not bright pink or anything like that. This cage actually, it's got a big zipped door. I made it for the Atticus Atlas moths. It used to be one of those canvas wardrobes that we weren't using anymore. So it's got mesh sewn all the way around, but at the bottom it's got a solid fabric, just camouflage material. It's pretty strong, but I find if I've snagged it on something, yeah, once it's started ripping, it rips easily. And I did keep caterpillars in this when I had so many at one point. When they started to change and were looking for somewhere to pupate, they did actually chew holes in this. So I don't know how the stick insects will fare using this, but I'm going to give it a try. It'll always be easy to replace the door bit, I suppose, with some other kind of mesh. Right, so I've cut all my pieces. I cut them quite roughly, I wasn't too exact or anything like that. And what I'll do is I'll probably cut them more into definite rectangular shapes. It's just easier than working with really wiggly unstraight lines. when you're sewing them. I had 2 lovely big long zips, of course, off the greenhouse, because there used to be a zip down either side of the door. So those 2 were quite easy, and then I had to be quite canny with the third one. It's not going to look as neat as the other 2 because I've had to cut pieces that were joined already. This piece was, I think, from probably the apex, so it's probably going to bulge a little bit. But I think it'll still be okay. Obviously I've not got a zip for that one, but I think you could use sleeping bag zips if you've got an old sleeping bag. They're nice and long. Yeah. With this one, it wouldn't have made any difference if I'd made it half the size. It was just what I had available. I tried to cut the polythene wisely. That's also got left, those little bits. They'll just go in the bin now. I suppose I could make some lovely wind chimes with those, but I don't know. Right, so my next plan is cut them a bit more evenly, the pieces, and then what I'll do is tack them. Yeah. Okay, just do the sides top, the other side and the bottom first. Just pin it as you go along, pulling it not too tight because you want to be able to slip it on. So do that first and then put your back on. I don't know if you can see, it's only tacked on at this stage, just quite big stitches. Right, having completed the sides, it doesn't matter whether you lie it down on its front or keep it upright. You start pinning the back on. Make sure you don't pull the sides too far back that you've taken up your excess from the front that you'll need to sew the front. You can tuck that underneath if that helps. So just pin it all the way around, then just cut the excess off, maybe about 1 centimetre from your pins, and then pull it off to sew. Once you've tacked your back bit on, just slide it back over, make sure it fits, make sure you've still got your excess all around the front. It's better that you check it at this stage before you put your bias binding on, because it's easier to undo your tacking and alter it. Once you put your bias binding on, it's going to be a lot more work if it won't actually fit and pull over. You may be asking, what is this bias binding? All it is a thin strip of material. So I'll just show you this to demonstrate. I don't know if you can see it very well, but just a thin strip of material. You'll need a very, very long piece to go all around your work. It's folded in half, so you've got a crease down the middle, and you would iron that. It's best to iron it if you've not got a bias binder, or you can buy bias taping from haberdasheries. Right, so you've got your crease in the middle, and then you fold your raw edges into the middle, into that crease. So I don't know if you can see. And then you iron that as well. So it's a lot of hard work to do this. I know you could leave the bias binding off, but I just think it neatens the whole project. So you would end up with very thin strip, and this would, you would put your seam that you've sewn on your project. So the edge, so make sure you've cut it thin enough so you're not bunching it up into your bias tape. So you trap it and then just sew along. This is maybe a bit thin and hard to work with. There's different size bias tools that you can buy. I've got two sizes. Obviously the bigger ones, the easier it is. If you're not a sewer already, you better go in for a bigger bias, because it can be tricky to keep a straight line on the sewing machine when you've only got a teeny little strip to work with. You may find you've not caught your seam into the tape, and then you'll find holes. See, I've not even used one of these before. I may make my own bias if I can find material that's suitable enough. And all you do is your material would be wider than this, because it would fold into the middle. So it would be this width plus that width again, where it would fold in the middle. Like I said, you could leave your edges like they are, but as you can see, and just machine sew it. But as you can see, it looks unfinished. It doesn't look very nice. So I'll make some bias, sewing machine it all the way on every single seam, and then I'll start on the front. Okay, I decided to, I found this, some more of this material that I used on the Atlas Atticus flight cage. I couldn't use my little bias tape tool thing because it's just too thin or slippy, it just wouldn't go through. So I just manually folded it and ironed it as I was going along like that. You still have to iron it with the tool, but it would have made it a little bit easier. But I thought, I've already got this material in, and again I'm keeping the project free. It's cost me nothing up to now other than things that I already had in. This material, it was a few meters for just a couple of pounds that I bought a couple of years ago. And I've cut my seams down, so cut it a little bit closer to my tacking, and I've started putting the bias binding on the top and bottom of the sides. Do that first. I don't know if I can do sewing with one hand. I like to feed it through, but I don't know if you can see. Maybe it's too bright. Just take your time, just like that, keeping it close to the edge. You should really be sewing in about the place where your tacking is underneath, so you won't end up having to take your tacking out. You could tack this on first, but the more holes in this there is, I suppose, the weaker it is. It is only for stick insects, so it doesn't have to be very strong, but I just pin it in place. It saves time as well anyway. Right, I'll carry on. So I'm going to complete the sides, and then I'm going to go all the way around the back of the enclosure. I did show you to put your pins that way into your work, but as you get closer it is better to put them that way, just in case you do get too close and run over the top. You're not going to snap your needle, unless it does hit the pin, of course, but you can get closer doing it this way. Right, so I finished all the bias binding at the back. Corners were a little bit more tricky, but I've done it without leaving any holes. I've made a start on the front with the bias binding on the front. I've sewn it directly onto the zip first, and then I've just pinned the zip on the top, all the way down one side and along the bottom. And the mesh door will be sewn up this side, so that you can fully open the door. And when you need to take the cover off, you could just slide it back off. So that's good if the poles do rust or whatever. I can reuse the cover and just make a new frame. I have covered the frame with insulation tape, but I did find that my roll of tape wouldn't go around the mesh side, so I went back through the poles that were left over and found 6 more of this length, so I was just able to replace most of them. And with the last side I did have to saw through the weld of the mesh, and I think it does look better without the mesh, to be honest, and it takes even more weight out of it. Not that it was much anyway, but there you go. I just wrapped the insulation tape round like this, just in a spiral, so it's overlapping slightly. It's a bit like if you've ever put new handlebar tape on a road bike, just a bit like that. Once you get the hang of it, you can do it quite neatly. Just carry on until it's completely covered. With putting the tape on, at first I tried to work round the corners carrying on, but I found I could do it neater if I covered the corners first and then just worked up to about that point, cut it and then carry on from the next straight point. Yeah, it's not perfect now, but you don't really notice when the cover's on, to be honest. Right, okay, so the zip is stitched on to the polythene now. I forgot to say that I did cut bias binding long enough beyond the length of the zip to go down the other side as well. So that's just left unstitched for now. That'll be stitched when I put the mesh on, attach it to this side. I've decided that it'll look neater if I put bias binding on this side of the zip as well. I think it'll just look tidier than stitching just the mesh onto this. So I'll do that now. Right, so the bias is on the inner side of the zip. I've folded the corners, just pinned them for now. You can see that, just to make a square shape. I'm going to have to make sure that the zip doesn't get stuck with excess material behind. If it does, I'll just have to trim some away. And then I've cut the mesh to size with plenty of excess all the way around. And I'm going to start pinning this side that hasn't got the zip together. Okay, to start the mesh door, I have it's helped me to tuck it underneath the bottom when I've laid it on its side, so that I can keep it taut. and I've pinched the edges together of the polythene and the edge of the mesh. I've just pinned it for now, but I'm going to tack along all the way along, and then what will happen is I will trap both the polythene and the mesh edges together with the bias binding, and that'll act as the hinge of my door. Right, it's the seams tacked together. Where I've met the zip, I've folded it and just tacked it to the underside of the bias tape. Hope that makes sense. I'll be trimming the excess off and then machine sewing the bias tape along. This excess at the top and this, the same at the bottom, will be dealt with after I've dealt with the hinge. Right, okay, so that's done. I actually had to put a second lot of bias binding over the top of the first because in hindsight I wish I hadn't done extra binding hanging off the zip to use later, because with me working on the project, taking the cover on and off, it had actually got really frayed, so I struggled to put it on, and all I've done is just make some more and go over the top of it, which has made it stronger, to be honest. Yeah, but in hindsight I wish I'd just put the bias binding to the length of the zip and separately done a piece for the side. I did have to take these pins out to get the cover off, but I've put them back in. Now also I've done one corner. All I do to square it off properly and to make it so the zip doesn't get stuck is, I'll just show you, I pinched it together like that, and then I sewed this bit. Can't remember what kind of stitch, but if you do it a certain way, your stitches disappear into the seam itself, and then you just trim off all this excess at the back. I'll show you the other corner that I did. So it becomes like that. Just check that your zip does actually go around, which it does, but I can't do it with one hand, I don't think. Yeah, it does go around. I've got hold of the camera with one hand, that's the problem. And then when the corners are done, it's probably going to be a bit tricky, but I'm just going to pin the mesh taut over the door, unzip the full zip to slip the cover off, and then sew the mesh, and then that's it really. Maybe just the ends of the zip to tidy up to make sure there's no holes. I'll hand sew that though, it's just too tricky on the machine. There's that many layers of binding and zip and what have you. And there you go, one complete stick insect enclosure. Doesn't look too bad. So that's one down, two more to go. I don't need to split the big one into two different compartments actually. I'm not suggesting you buy one of these greenhouses to make into stick insect enclosures, but maybe someone's giving away one that's been damaged on free cycle, or that you have one yourself, or maybe it's give other ideas. Maybe you've seen little plastic joints or poles in, say, places like B&Q, where you can make something similar for cheap. So if you're a fan of being thrifty or short of finances or whatever, I'm sure if you're like me, you would rather spend the money on the actual bugs. We all need enclosures, but it's more exciting getting the bugs, isn't it? I hope it's given you some ideas. There could have been all different kinds of variations of what I've made. One great big one, or maybe some smaller ones. Okay, so there's one done. And in this one I've put my black beauty stick insects in it. Don't know where they're all hiding, there's lots in there. And two. In this one I've put Ramulus Artemis tie stick insects. They were in desperate need because they were outgrowing the container that they had before. They're quite a big long stick insect. I wouldn't put anything too heavy bodied in these with this mesh on, like Maclay's Spectra. I wouldn't put those in using this mesh. I'd use something a bit stronger. I've decided what I'm going to do as well is just use some bias binding, and I'm going to sew it onto a bit of this polythene stuff and make like a little label thing. I'm going to sew that onto the front, so just on 3 sides, and then you can just slip a piece of paper in saying what's in the enclosure. And that's all of them. So there's 3/4 kgs that I got out of it, because although this is one big one at the minute, I've made it so that I can put a divider in, and I'll just use sticky back velcro. And to strengthen it as well, this is all one piece of mesh, but I have put this strip of fabric in, and there's a press stud fastening, so the whole door could be unzipped and come forward. This one was a pain because although I have got 2 sleeping bags that I could have used the zips off, I thought, well, there's a charity that takes sleeping bags for people that need them, homeless people, and I thought, well, it's very selfish of me to indulge in my hobby and not give them to the charity. So instead what I've done is just use multiple zips. I have used a toddler's sleeping bag zip, so the zips on both sides, on this side of it, but on this side you had to use 3 zips, which is a bit of a pain in one way, but on the other hand it can be opened at various points depending on if the stick insects all head downwards or all head upwards. It is best to use you know, like jacket zips where they fully unzip and then you can reattach them. This side, with it being a sleeping bag one, ever did have to remove the cover, I have to take the zip completely off the end, which is quite hard to thread back on, but that's only if ever the frame becomes too rusty or whatever. So all in all, it's cost me less than £4 really. The mesh was £1.99 per metre, and I've got all of that left to do something else with. The insulation tape I could have probably got from a pound shop if I hadn't had it in, but it may not be necessary to do that anyway. I've just done it as a precaution. The fabric I already had in. The fabric for the big top one was just a pair of camouflage shorts. That's all there's left of them. I only had enough to do the bias binding with one fold, so there's a raw edge showing, but I've done 2 lines of stitching to keep the fraying back, and it's not a material that frays really bad, so that's okay. So there we have it. I've just got one name label left to do on that one with the Ramulus artemis in, the Thai stick insects. In this one the Vietnamese prickly stick insects are going in. Giant budwing on that side when I've done a divider. I need to collect some more brambles first as well, so that's why I've not put them in yet. So there you have it. I hope you've enjoyed watching how I've made these, and I hope it's given you your own ideas of what you could do with things that may be lying about or you see offered from someone for free or whatever. Thanks for watching.